This is the In the Rabbit Hole episode archive project. What you're about to watch and listen to is a past episode from In the Rabbit Hole Urban Survival Podcast. You can learn more by visiting intherabbithole.com. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel now.
And now, two guys who survived a ninja attack, Aaron and Jonathan.
Howdy, and welcome to episode 66 of In the Rabbit Hole's Urban Survival Podcast. In this episode, we practice survival yoga from the back of the class. We're your hosts, Aaron
and Jonathan.
And you are in the rabbit hole, safe and sound. Today's show is sponsored by Cat's Coffee. If you're looking for truly exceptional coffee to help you survive the morning or the next zombie apocalypse, you need to be drinking Cat's. They specialize in the finest coffee from sources that prioritize environmental responsibility and are fair trade certified. Their goal is to achieve perfection in every cup. Check them out at Katz, K-A-T-Z as in zebra, coffee.com, or click on their bright green banner on the site and make sure you're dealing with an official sponsor of the show. Again, that's Katz, K-A-T-Z as in zebra, coffee.com. So to start off with a disclaimer today, we are not medical professionals, we are not fitness professionals, we are not wellness professionals, we are not healthcare professionals of any kind. We're not really even qualified to give you advice on lawn care. Not that that has anything to do with it.
We are not professional.
We are not professional whatsoever. And if that's not been apparent, then you haven't been listening carefully. So with that said, the views expressed today are based solely on personal opinion and personal experience. Before engaging in any kind of exercise or diet program or blowing your nose, you should talk to a medical, healthcare, wellness, whatever professional that suits you.
We've only done non-scientific studies.
And they have been mostly science fiction studies, I think.
And mostly on rabbits. So we can't even be sure these work on people.
Yes. Although now that we've gotten past that, now PETA will get afterwards, which is fine because I like...
I always wanted a war with PETA. They don't like guns anyway, right?
No. Well, because, guns hurt animals and people hurt animals and I eat animals. Yeah, and in the words of, what was it, the actress that is playing Katniss in the new Hunger Games movie, Screw PETA, I think was her.
There you go.
Was her reaction to their reaction of the dead squirrel in the movie. But anyway, I'm all for animal rights. I'm just, there are fine lines. But anyway, we're digressing into a completely different show about animal rights. So
but we could use the speaking of eating animals as an excellent segue.
That is very true. And this is a show that Jonathan, you and I have talked about doing this show for a very long time.
We may have thought of this show before we even thought of the overall show. That is true.
Because it is a big one. And I think to say that the survival community tends to be a physically unfit community would be an erroneous statement. I think more accurately, in general, I mean, we're all pretty aware of this, that society as a whole, we've become largely pretty flabby and in pretty bad shape. And this, more so than many things that preppers focus on, is extremely important. It's, and this really is one of those survival chi things that will have tremendous impact both on your life today, tomorrow, and help you get through bad situations.
And the nice part about this is it really does have a nearly immediate. It's not going to be overnight.
Yeah.
But a very quick impact. You'll see the results more quickly than you would some other things.
Yeah. And so let's go ahead and launch into, and I think we can start the show with 7 tips that at least I've found personally to be the best way to get into some kind of physical fitness program and to maintain it and stick with it. And to start with, it's like everything else. Have a plan. Have some clue where you're going to begin and have some concept of where do you want to end up, and make those goals reasonable. And, it's like everything we've talked about. If you make your goals reasonable, and that is a relative term. So it's whatever is reasonable for you. And you then get to that reasonable level. You can always choose to go further, but it's very easy to burn yourself out if you make these incredibly lofty goals that you then can't attain or find that you don't have time to attain. And then it becomes screw the whole endeavor.
Right. One of the things that's nice, you can set a long-term goal. So, if you have 15 pounds to lose, and somebody, you may have more, you may have less, but if you have 15, the goal is, I want to lose 15 pounds. And that's one of the goals. You probably also want to improve your cardiovascular fitness, all these other things. But let's just say you want to lose 15 pounds. To say, I want to lose X pounds this week, and making that realistic. Like this week, I'm going to lose 3 pounds. And I'm going to do that every week for the next 5 weeks. That is a great way to do it, because then when you see the results, you can work on that greater long-term goal. You feel like you're getting somewhere. If it's just, I'm going to lose 15, when you lose 3, it's amazing the amount of disappointment a lot of people feel. It's like, I didn't get there in a week, and somehow you thought magically you would. So it's all about getting proper end goals and then interim goals set up.
Yeah, and being patient with it. I worked with a trainer and a physical therapist for quite a while after my the back surgery I had years ago. And when I was young, I was extremely athletic. And when I was recovering from my back surgery and I started working with this trainer and physical therapist, it was funny because he immediately saw me getting frustrated with how bad a shape I had gotten into. And he looked at me and he stopped me and he said, I want you to understand something. It took you years to get this out of shape. It's going to take time for you to get back into shape. And so I think that's another thing, being patient with it and understanding that not only is it a process, but then once you're through that process, it's also going to be a long-term thing. And I think that's another tip that we can kind of jump into, is to not look for these quick fixes. It takes time to get into better physical shape than you are. And yeah, there are immediate benefits and stuff, but it's going to take time, and it's also going to be a lifestyle change for you. Unless you're somebody that already eats really well and already exercises on a regular basis, and then in that case, it's not necessarily for you. But it's along the lines that you are going to have to be patient with the outcome of this. And this drives me nuts to watch people go through Jenny Craig or any of these others. And I understand the programs work and I think Weight Watchers is probably a little better, from what I understand about Weight Watchers, a little better than Jenny Craig. It's these ideas that, well, I'm going to eat this prepackaged crap and I'm only going to do it for this amount of time and lose this much weight. And the problem is, what happens when you go off that diet? And while some of those programs do have some support systems as far as educating you for how to be afterwards, it's not their main focus, and most people don't. They're just like, well, I want to lose 50 pounds.
Right. And using the Weight Watchers example, actually they're more of a lifestyle change.
Yeah, Weight Watchers is.
Yeah, they teach you how to count food and things like that, and figure out how to do it better. And that, I think that's part of it too, though. Some people are going to be very good about things like counting calories. And while that might work for you, that may be the way to actually do it, to know how many you're consuming, how many you're burning, and being able to maintain. Some people might be able to maintain that forever. I know, I actually know someone who uses that almost as a personal game they play.
Mm-hmm.
The goal is to basically burn and consume an equal number of calories on a daily basis and not go over and not go under. And for him, that's like his own personal little game. For other people, counting calories will never work. It just isn't going to be the thing to do, and you have to learn how to eat differently and do it that way. And there's a lot of different diet plans out there. I don't think we both have ones that have worked for us individually, but I don't think either one of us would particularly endorse any particular plan out there. Although I would say, I'll go in the opposite direction. I would stay away from any fly by night or fad plan. If you have a buddy who tried something out because he just read about it on the internet, I do a lot more research, see how long it's been around, see how many people have been doing it, and not just that, but see how many people do it, stay on it, and actually change their lifestyle because of it.
Yeah, and that going back to that lifestyle change, that is an important one. Is it about a lifestyle change or is it about a quick fix? And I think that's what you said is very important as far as doing your own homework, doing your research, talking to your doctor or whoever you've decided to consult with about these things. And you were talking about counting calories. That is, I think that's very hard for a lot of people to do because it is very detail oriented. Unless you're a detail oriented person, it's not fun to do. I did it for about 2 years and I kept spreadsheets and obsessed over what I was eating. And it was all very carefully balanced. And it was how many carbs, how many grams of protein have I had, and what kind of foods were being combined in different meals and how did they interact. And it became, I don't do it anymore just because simply I've fallen out of the habit and I've gotten, but I did it for long enough that by and large, without counting calories, I can look at and quickly put together meals where I know roughly what kind of calories they have and how the different foods are going to interact with one another in that meal.
Well, but you brought up a good point right there. You know, even you fell out of the habit because it was a lot of additional work. So while now you have a general idea of what's going in and what's going out, it was difficult for you to maintain that stringent a lifestyle. And you're pretty, I mean, not any insult. It's actually a positive thing for some things and a negative thing for others, but you're pretty OCD.
Oh, I am extremely OCD. And I mean, to give more context to what Jonathan's talking about, when I was doing that, I was also in a gym working out 18 hours a week, sometimes as much as 21 hours a week. And I did that for about 2 years. And it was just, like he was saying, I became obsessive over it. And I really enjoyed it. And I really enjoyed everything about it. And I loved working out. And I still love working out. And it's one of the things I'm in the middle of trying to get better about getting back in the habit. And that's another thing that happens to us is that one of the first things to go when our lives become busy and everything else is anything that we do for ourselves. I've always found that to be true. And for myself and for most people I know, we get busy and we're like, oh, well, I'll do this, whatever it is you do for yourself. It's like, oh, well, next week I'll get back to it. And it just, we start falling out of that. And that's what happened to me with the gym. And it was there. I do not have the time anymore to dedicate that much time. Even if I had like a really badass home gym, I do not have the time to spend on that anymore. But trying to get back into the habit of spending about 6 hours a week in a gym is really where I'd like to get back to. And I think that leads to another tip, which is you have to be consistent. You have to do it. You have to not blow it off. You have to make yourself, if you're going to do it in the morning, you make yourself do it in the morning. And I think that's another thing too, is understanding there's times of the day that are better. Like Jonathan, you don't like working out in the mornings, do you?
No, I don't. I find working out in the morning to be difficult. And again, I get up early. So it's not so much that, it's just, I don't find it works with my speed of things at that time in the morning. I'm just not in the right mindset. So I tend to work out in the evenings or late afternoon. So I try to always do it before 8 p.m. at night. It's a personal thing. If I do it after 8, I can't get to sleep. But I do it before 8 o'clock, but after work.
Yeah. And
I think that consistency thing is totally true because it's very easy to say, I missed yesterday. So I'll just skip today too. I'll get to it.
Yeah.
It's very easy to do. And the thing about consistency, though, is once you do something, and I don't remember where this comes from, Aaron, so I hate spouting statistics that aren't at least based in something, but it's that whole idea that 21 days builds a routine. And I've seen it in a lot of places. There's even diet plans built around that. But
yeah, I know what you're talking about.
The whole idea that 21 days builds a routine. It takes 3 weeks of doing something before you start building a routine. And the problem is it only takes probably, and I'm going to make this one up, but I'm going to guess, it only takes 1 or 2 days to completely fall out of a routine.
I would agree with that. I would give it a few more days than that, but I would generally agree with that. And that's kind of what happened with me. I got I got to the point where I was just so busy and I started blowing out. It's like, well, you know what? I can't wake up that early on Monday I've got all this stuff I've got to do, and I need to work late Sunday night or something. And I think that goes back to conversations we've had about having priorities, and caring for yourself has to be major priority. That doesn't mean you need to go take on what would normally be a part-time job doing it, but still you need to make something for it.
Yeah. Actually, that leads pretty nicely into the next one about building into those consistent behaviors. And you don't want to do that just by jumping in, right? Like for you to just jump into 18 hours a week in the gym, we're not suggesting anyone necessarily do that. I mean, the idea is you come in with small changes. Maybe you start with a once every other day on a treadmill, and you build that up. And same thing for diet, by the way. You don't necessarily, and depending on where you are, again, talk to a medical professional, and it depends on what size you are and where you want to get to. But you don't necessarily want to jump into some radical diet change overnight.
No, and I think there's several reasons for that. One is it's very hard to stick with massive changes in your life when you're trying to be consistent and build habits and stuff. The other thing, too, is it has a tendency to have a real shock to your system, which then has a tendency to make you feel like crap, which then, the fastest thing that we are going to fall out of habit of is if something doesn't feel good. And so I think that's the other reason. And then another reason for making small changes, and this was one of the things that I learned, was if you make small changes over a period of time, one, it's easier to get in the habit of doing, and it's easier to deal with. The other thing is that this becomes very important in any kind of exercise or diet, is actually being aware of what your body's doing, how you feel, how you're progressing. And if you do a whole bunch of stuff all at once, you have no idea what's actually making you feel or progress. And that was one of the things I learned, and a lot of it had to do with when I started getting into like much more advanced stuff of using supplements and stuff like that. And it was really like change one thing at a time, so that if something goes squirrely, it makes you feel really bad, or all of a sudden you're not processing protein well and you're not putting on muscle or something, then it's easily identifiable. And that is where sometimes keeping records and stuff, especially when you start off, becomes important. And I'll give a funny example. So I was going along, and I think I'd been at it for probably about a year, and I was really trimmed down, and I was really getting back into great shape, and I was spending all this time in the gym, and I was really enjoying it. And I had extremely consistent results. I knew from week to week exactly what my progress was going to be like. I'd just gotten it so fine-tuned. I knew exactly what it was. And then all of a sudden, 1 week, actually, I think it was about a 2-week period, all of a sudden, I wasn't trimming down anymore, but I was still building muscle and everything else was fine. And I couldn't for the life of me figure out what on earth was going on. And it was funny because Thomas, my trainer, said, "Well, what have you been eating?" And I was like, "I haven't changed anything." And he's like, "Bullshit. Something has changed. Go back and look at your spreadsheets and see something in there has changed. You've done something squirrely." And I had started using chocolate milk in my protein shakes instead of regular milk. And for whatever reason, when I was in the grocery store, because I am like a chocolate milk fanatic, and I saw chocolate milk in the grocery store, and it was sitting next to a skim milk. And for some reason, I was going too fast or something, and my brain just skipped. And I was like, skim chocolate milk. That's awesome. I'll put that in my shakes. It was not skim milk. It was full-blown, fatty, chocolatey goodness. And so it was that one little change, just completely. It didn't screw me for 2 weeks, but it definitely held back my progress for 2 weeks. And then I got rid of it, although I did really enjoy those protein shakes for those 2 weeks. So to go on to another one, which was also go slowly and being patient and understanding that what you're doing is a process. And I think the other thing with going slowly, and this is has more to do with the exercises themselves than diet per se, which is it's very easy. If you go too fast, your body has to adjust. it may not be used to the physical exertion. It may not be used to that kind of physical exertion, and your body has to adapt. And if you go too fast, it's very easy to create injuries. Talk more about in a bit.
And I think a lot of that's true on the diet side too. You know, there's a lot of people who have these goals of, I want to lose this much weight because, you know, it's amazing how many times I've heard it from men and women, by the way, spurred on by, I've got this thing I'm going to.
Yeah.
So I have to lose this much weight in that much time to fit into the suit I don't fit into anymore or whatever. And we said it earlier, but that whole idea that how long did it take you to not fit into that suit? And now you think that in the next week, it's healthy or reasonable to lose 15 pounds or whatever it might be. You know, you have to set reasonable goals. And part of that is understanding that patience here more than anything else is a virtue, and don't let things taking longer than you thought discourage you.
Absolutely. And I think that's the other danger with just doing it. It's okay if it's spurred on by an event, but don't let it just be about that event, because then, of course, as soon as that event's over, you're not going to keep it up.
Right. But go slow here, I think, definitely for the exercise, definitely go slow.
Mm-hmm.
Be meticulous and methodical.
Yeah.
And then for the diet, it's kind of the same thing, but you want to include, just like for exercise, you want to include patience in all of that as well. You know, if the goal is to be able to lift a certain amount or to lose a certain amount, either way, know that it may take longer than you thought, and that's okay. Just keep working at it, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing weird about you or wrong with you just because somebody else was losing 5 pounds in a week and you were losing 2.
Yeah, people's bodies react. It can be different body types. It can be different body chemistry. It can be all kinds of things can affect that. Even my mother now works out with the guy Thomas. And while in many ways she and I are physically very similar, we have the same physical quirks, but I process protein apparently a lot better than she does. But that's, you know, there's gender difference there, and there's all kinds of stuff.
Gender, age, there's all kinds of difference between you and the guy next to you.
Exactly.
Or the woman next to you, or whoever it might be.
And depending on where you are with your weight, that is also going to make a big difference in how fast weight comes off. Because generally, people that are much heavier, the weight's going to fly off very fast at first.
You know, Aaron, that's an interesting one. I was just talking to somebody else about that who said, yeah, I knew somebody who was on this diet and they came down from 250 to 175. And, you know, when they were on it, they were losing like 10 pounds a week. And I looked at the guy and I was like, yeah, but when the guy at 250 is losing 10 pounds a week, think about what percentage of his body weight that is.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to lose 10 pounds. You're not going to do it in a week.
Yeah, I will say that the thinner you become and the leaner you become, the harder it becomes to keep pushing past. I think the leanest I got was, I want to say I got down to 7.5%, maybe even 7%. And it was extremely, we were talking before the show about, just diminishing returns. You get to a certain point where it is just, you have to do so much work just to get rid of one more half pound. And so it's kind of crazy, but I think that's getting to a point in physical fitness that's far beyond the scope of this show.
Oh yeah. You need a trainer, a physician, or whoever it might be. Again, we are not medical or physical fitness professionals.
Yeah, and we're going to say that quite often throughout the show, just so there is no misunderstanding. These are all personal opinions based on nonsense. My other suggestion would be try lots of stuff, because I know there are people that just, and I hate this expression, I just think it is so stupid, but there are people that are, oh, well, I don't want to go to a gym because I'm not a hamster. And it's like, no, you're not a hamster, but yeah, getting outside is great too. When people call gyms hamster wheels, it just irritates me. There are definite advantages and disadvantages to all of it, but you should try lots of stuff and find what works for you, and not just what works for you as far as getting into shape, but what you're going to enjoy doing. Because if you hate it, and there are lots of people that hate going to gyms, then you're not going to do it. And forcing yourself into it for most people just isn't going to work.
Yeah, I mean, just to give an example of something like that happened recently, my wife, Karen, was thinking about joining a gym, but she hates gyms. I mean, not a hamster wheelish. She just doesn't like being inside that long, doesn't want to stand there in one place and not go anywhere. She's got a lot of valid reasons for her that it makes perfect sense not to want to go to a gym.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things she found is we're in Austin now. She found a local set of trails, and we've also got our dogs. And she's saying the dogs really need to be out more. It would be great for them to get a little exercise too. So she's now, within the last 3 weeks, she's gotten herself up to doing 5 miles every single day of trails.
Oh, that's great, man.
Oh, yeah, it's fantastic. She feels better. The dogs are worn out. I mean, when they get back, and they're doing great, they love it. When they hear that they're going to the park, their ears perk up, they're waiting by the front door. But that's the kind of thing where if you've got that alternative, not everybody does, though. If you live in, again, this is all about urban prep and urban survival. So if you live in a large city and it's more difficult to find those trails, but you still don't like a gym, there are staircases in lots of cities and lots of buildings.
Just taking walks around your neighborhood is a good way to get exercise. And it's also a great way to understand your surroundings.
Oh, yeah. And actually, that's a great way to put it, too. There's multiple purposes to doing those things. Mm-hmm. And it's so beneficial to your health, to our health, anyone's health, to do those things that, if you don't love the gym, that's okay. There's a million and one alternatives, but people who do work well at gyms, I wouldn't put them down in any way. Aaron, you were doing great at the gym. I'm not a huge gym fan, but I can put up with it and do it just long enough. But when I'm done, I'm really ready to get out of there. So I think everybody's got their own tolerance for that kind of thing, and just understand what your tolerances are. And like you started this off with, try different things. Yeah. If the gym isn't the thing for you, then go on a hike. If a hike is not available in your area, walk around the neighborhood. Yeah. If that's not your best alternative because it's a little too flat and the distances aren't long enough for you, find some staircases. There is always another option. There is always another option. And I think to do one thing by itself is also one of the things I kind of wanted to bring up. Yep. It is not necessarily very good. You should try to get some variety. Walking, that's great. Maybe try some biking too. I did yoga for a little while, and it was fun. I did it. I will admit, I did it mainly because I was dating a trainer, and she wanted to go do yoga on Saturday mornings, and then convinced me there will be lots of pretty girls in the class, and you can sit, you can do the yoga from the back of the class and have the nice view. And so I was immediately sold. And while the exercise itself was pretty good, it was enjoyable, but ultimately it wasn't for me. But I did try to do it every once in a while just to have something different and to kind of mix things up a little bit. And so I think that's the other thing too, is that you do need to mix things up so that it's not just a routine, and so that you do get some enjoyment, just like you were talking about with Karen going to the trails and stuff. Yeah, you've got to make it personal for yourself and something you enjoy. And that's it. That leads into our number 7. Which I think we've both heard a million times, and we all do it. Said it a million times. You're at a restaurant or you're at a place, and there's something you really want, and this always comes out, and it's basically the response or the statement is, "I'm going to do this now, and I'll fix it with something later." Like, I'm going to have this chocolate cake now, and I'll walk it off later. I'm going to eat this cheesecake and I'll hit the gym for an extra hour. I will miss the gym today and I'll do twice as much tomorrow. Yeah, it never, ever works out. Nope. Maybe on extremely rare occasions it will. I hate to say never, and what reminded me of this is Ron from EMS Newbie Podcast and I were talking a couple weeks ago about a book he's reading on, I think it's on willpower. I don't remember exactly what it was. And that was one of the things, it was talking about willpower, that people they say they're going to do something. There's a specific term for the action. I don't remember what it was. Essentially, that was the outcome, and it was funny because I'm trying to remember the exact example. Oh, the exact example was actually hysterical, that when McDonald's put salads and stuff on their menu, all of a sudden they saw the sale of Big Macs and French fries skyrocket. Mm-hmm. And what they finally figured out was, and it was this same principle, that all of these people were going in and going, "Oh, there's healthy stuff here. Oh, well, I'll do that tomorrow. Or I'll do that for dinner." And instead they would eat Big Macs, and that people never ended up doing it. And so that's
That's very important. And that was one of the things I learned when I was really being serious about working out was if you want to do something, earn it first. I remember there was one Thanksgiving where to get ready for Thanksgiving, Thomas put me through this just insane, nasty leg workout to the point where after workout, I had to go lay down on a bench for about 15 minutes to get my bearings. It was just sick. But he was like, now you're ready for Thanksgiving. You can eat whatever you want. And, you do. You have to earn. You can't pay for it later because you won't pay for it.
And I mean, it doesn't have to necessarily be that extreme either. The idea,
no. That was
I'm not putting that down. I think
that
that's
very
worked
extreme.
out well for you, and knowing you, that's what you wanted to do and needed to do.
Yeah.
But we're not telling you, I brought up cheesecake and chocolate cake earlier, skipping a day at the gym. We're not telling you can never do those things. I don't think I would ever say to avoid chocolate cake at all costs for the rest of your life.
No, that's not what this conversation is.
You've got to go do 3 hours of leg routines before you have that piece of chocolate cake. But at the same time, make sure you understand what you've done, what it's going to do, what the impact is, and the fact that most likely, and actually I can guarantee you this, it doesn't matter how far you walk the next day, you're not burning that chocolate cake off with walking.
No, what was it? We were in the mall one time.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm talking about.
Starbucks, caramel, frappuccino, and the 3 very large individuals drinking it and talking to each other about how the mall walk they're doing will burn those frappuccinos right off.
Mm-hmm.
You would have to be walking at such a pace for such a distance. I don't know what the average person burns while walking in calories, but it's just not that much. It's healthy. I'm not telling you not to. Actually, I'm telling you, walk more. It's a healthy thing to do. If you don't walk a lot now, walk as much as you can. But just know that when you drink the caramel frappuccino from Starbucks in the giant cup, it's something like, I don't remember what exactly, it was like 750 calories last I looked, or something really high like that.
I think it was more, I want to say it was because of the sugar and everything else, it was somewhere in the 1200 range.
It might even be, yeah.
And thinking back, and I'm not going to give exact numbers, and I don't remember exactly what it would have, but when I was doing just really massive workouts and in a 2-hour period, I want to say I could maybe burn somewhere in the neighborhood of 400 or 500 calories. I think that was about right.
Right.
So it takes a tremendous amount of work to burn off those calories, and to think that these women were going to, even if they were only 750 calories, to think that they were going to burn them off walking around the mall at even a brisk pace was quite ridiculous.
That's okay. So just to put it in perspective, and I don't want anybody to think that I'm trying to state things bigger than they are. A regular caramel frappuccino blended beverage, I just looked it up, is 510 calories.
Okay.
I believe what they had was the bigger one, because we did look it up at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But still, 510 calories is an awful lot for a single beverage. I mean, we're not talking about something you'll be drinking all day here.
Even if you were drinking it all day, that is a ridiculous amount of calories.
That's a meal. That's a meal.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it absolutely is. And not a good one.
That's the way to think about these things. It's just understanding what it is that you're doing and not trying to say, I'll make up for it tomorrow with something else that is not even comparable. And, like Aaron said, you've really got to do your thing before and then reward yourself for it. Maybe that's the way to best think about it. It's do what you're going to do and then take the reward. Don't take the reward first.
Right. And I think also that you have to understand is that when you take that reward, you're basically just getting a break even. You're not going to progress. Right. And for a lot of people, they need and want that reward. For me, I had the rewards in place, and often I was getting obsessive about it. I mean, going back to qualifying it all with that, I was becoming obsessive. And so I would forego any of the rewards because I wanted the progress more than I wanted the 5-minute sugar high.
You brought up another good point that people say all the time, and we hear all the time, especially from our guy friends.
Mm-hmm.
Women tend not to think this way, but a lot of guys are like, there's a lot of comments for why it's totally okay for them to have a big beer gut and be out of shape. But you mentioned something earlier, and I'll let you say it again, but it was great, and we've heard it too many times.
I hear men all the time. Well, I eat like a man. My response is fine. You can. Just you're going to need to work out like a man also.
Yeah, it's like, I'll tell you what, when you start working that farm.
Yeah, exactly. When you start working that farm.
And pulling that heavy farm equipment and moving large animals and everything else, then you go eat like that farming man that you think you are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and at that point, your body actually does need those fats and everything else. But and I see these guys and they're doing it and they're eating the double bacon cheeseburger and all this other stuff. And, and it's funny, as men, we have a tendency that if there is anything at all that women do or women talk about, we don't want to do anything that remotely resembles that because in some way that will make us feminine. And personally, I think it's just completely asinine. And that's really what that is, I think. And it's also the excuse of I just want to, what is the funny expression, build a shed for my tool.
Oh, yeah. We've heard that was the other one we were talking about earlier.
Yeah. But
heard that too many times.
But it is kind of ridiculous. And it's like, just get over it. Nobody, for the most part, really wants to obsess over what they eat or have to, eat a salad or whatever. But it is what you have to do. If survival, and I think this goes back to the whole thing of, I see people that will spend tremendous amounts of money on gear and food storage and all this other stuff and these elaborate systems for being self-sufficient, and then they're 100 pounds overweight. To me, it's just completely ridiculous. It's like, wow, I mean, yeah, you're great. You're ready for the end of the world, but how about that heart attack you're about a prime rib away from? Why do all this effort? Why go through all this energy and expense to purely ignore physical health and fall victim to what in most cases is more likely to get us, which is a heart attack or something related to that?
Yeah, and that something to think about as we go into the rest of the show is most of us live a relatively sedentary lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
Not because we necessarily even want to. I mean, to be honest, I'd love to be outdoors more and doing more. But I work behind a desk. I mean, that's most of my day is spent sitting at a desk or sitting in meetings or sitting in a car going to a meeting, sitting on an airplane. It's a lot of sitting. And it requires me to really consciously make a decision to go do something. I have to make the decision to go get up and do more. I mean, even if it's as simple as I have a meeting that's 3 floors away from where I am, I'm going to walk the stairs. Little things like that really do make a difference. And it's a good way that we were talking about going slowly and small changes. Start with those little things. But because this is an urban prep, urban survival show, we know a lot of you are just as sedentary as we are in our jobs. So we know that there's a difficulty here, but you got to take that sedentary lifestyle into account when you think about your diet and your exercise requirements.
And I think that's another thing too, is that, and we'll get into that a little bit when we talk about diet, but that people completely misunderstand and blow out of proportion how many calories in a day they think they need. And
right.
So, but we'll get to that in just a bit. But I think there's one more thing before we kind of do specific sections on diet or exercise is understanding the minutia of things. And this kind of goes back to talking about when I was being obsessive about things, there were ridiculous things I would do just to burn a few extra calories in a day, which I'm not saying they were bad. It's just understanding what benefit. And one of them was really funny. For a very brief period of time, I considered replacing my office chair with a one of those crap. I just forgot that. I think Bosa balls or yoga ball. You've seen them in movies, you've seen them on TV, or maybe you've used one, but it's just like a giant kind of beach ball or something. And so I considered completely replacing my office chair with one of those as a way of burning extra calories in a day. And I think I finally figured out I was going to burn like an extra 100 calories a day or something. And within the realm of the situation I was in and what I was trying to achieve, it made sense. I ended up not doing it because it seemed extremely uncomfortable and like a good way of whacking myself unconscious accidentally. But those are there. You hear about stuff like that a lot because a lot of the fitness stuff tends to be geared toward people that are really serious about it. I think it's very easy, not a lot of the products, but it's very easy to get into reading that literature. And some of the stuff they talk about, if it seems kind of extreme or something like that, it probably is. And the gains are probably pretty small.
It's interesting. We talked a lot about, we've had a few shows on firearms and things like that, but it's the same thing there where it's like that extra whatever of MOA you might receive out of one rifle versus another. They're aimed at a lot of, or no pun intended, a lot of that type of marketing and a lot of the type of information is aimed at people who are pro-am or professional at what they do. And when you start taking into account some of that and realize that it's less of an impact on an amateur or somebody who's just doing things for a lifestyle, then you'll realize that it's not something you need to necessarily be paying as much attention to. Not to say there aren't benefits of a Bosa ball chair. I know some people actually use it for posture. Mm-hmm. There's all kinds of other reasons to use it. But if your reason is the extra 100 calories a day you might burn, there are other ways to do that as well.
Yeah, and I think, and it's also, is it, and I think that was an important thing. Is it going to have an impact at the junction you're at? Not to say that we shouldn't all look for as many ways in a day to burn as many calories because of our sedentary lifestyles, but some things just become splitting hairs. And I know another one of them was, and I'm not 100% sure about this, but I do believe this was that the most efficient fat burn from a cardiovascular exercise standpoint was to break it up 3 times a day at 20 minutes. That was, in those 20-minute increments, was where the most efficient fat burning was happening. I see people misunderstand that concept a lot, and understanding what that actually is doing and who's really using that and at what point that is really. So again, and it's also who's going to do that. Who's going to do 20 minutes of cardio 3 times a day? I mean, even when I was spending a ridiculous amount of time, I didn't, there was never a point where I could find a third time of the day to actually do 20 minutes of cardio. I mean, what was I going to do? Walk out of my office and go run around in a circle out in the parking lot and then come back in nice and sweaty to.
Hell, let's face it, for some of us, 20 minutes of cardio is all we can get in a whole day because of busy schedules.
And I think the other thing to understand is supplements. We have become a society, not just Americans, but the idea that a pill will fix everything. There are instances where pills are necessary for medications and stuff, but there's a lot of instances where these supplements, there are some really good supplements, there are supplements that are complete and utter crap, and then there is a time and a place. I take issue with any trainer that immediately starts people off on supplements. I personally, my belief is everybody, for the most part, should start, with the exception of like maybe milk thistle or something like that to kind of clean out the system. But for the most part, most of it's unnecessary. And most of those supplements, excluding maybe protein from that, even that, you can wait quite a while before. And it's like, hey, let's get the diet straightened out. Let's get everything else figured out first. And then once we've really started to get somewhere and we're trying to push it a little bit, add something to it. Anytime you start messing with supplements, that is really a time when you absolutely need somebody that knows what they're talking about and somebody that knows what they're doing and somebody that you're paying probably to have your best interest at heart. Then that's it. But there are too many instances where crap comes out on the market and it's just complete. It's either bunk or it's actually doing a lot of harm to people. But beat that horse up too much. To kind of go into diet a little bit, which there's 2 things here. One is roughly 80 to 85% of your physical fitness is going to actually be diet. I see people all the time, and this kind of goes back to, oh, well, I'm going to eat a cheeseburger. And we had, you and I both have a friend, Jonathan, that did this. She, huge runner, but baffled by the fact that she doesn't lose weight. Or actually, I think she does lose, she thinks she loses weight, but we've never actually seen her lose weight.
She doesn't lose weight. Yeah, I think that's the key there. She's not losing weight. She actually is quite physically.
Oh yeah.
Her cardiovascular health is amazing.
Yeah.
But she's never going to get to the point she wants to get to because she can never burn the calories she wants to burn just by running after eating. And I'm going to use this. It's not meant to be mean, so nobody take it that way. But after eating a bag of Doritos, and I mean the big bag, and then having a normal day of other meals, you're not going to go running the next day and have any positive impact. You're just going to potentially maybe break even, because I've never actually seen her get larger either.
No, she's always stayed exactly the same.
Yeah, she stays pretty much the same. And, maybe for her, that's really, it's about expectation setting.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that bag of Doritos is just never going to go away.
Mm-hmm.
But it's all about making those lifestyle changes and the choices, because like we said earlier, if your whole goal is I'm going to do X and fix it with Y, then it's probably not going to work out in your favor in the end.
Yeah. To kind of go back to this, it's a whole thing about starting slowly. Even with diet, if you try to make these massive changes overnight, one, you're not going to stick with it. A good example for that, a lot of people, is salt. And if you try to just cut out salt overnight, unless this is something that your doctor has actually said you are going to die tomorrow if you don't cut out salt completely. For a lot of people, they've gotten so used to having so much salt in their food that to try to get rid of all of that salt overnight is extremely difficult because their tastes have become accustomed to it. And I'll give an example of that. One of the first things I did when I was really trying to get back into shape was I cut out sodas completely. And because somebody pointed out to me exactly how much salt is in sodas. And so I want to say I went for a solid year where I didn't drink coffee and I didn't have sodas. And then after a year, I thought, I'm going to treat myself. I'm going to have a soda. I love Diet Dr. Pepper. I'm going to have myself a Diet Dr. Pepper. And I had one, and it was the most disgusting thing I'd ever tasted. It was like I might as well have been drinking crappy seawater. And the reason was now all of a sudden I had become so sensitive to salt, and my palate had become so sensitive to salt that's all I could taste was tremendous amount of salt. Damn, it completely ruined soda for me. But that's an example. So taper back slowly. I mean, I know somebody else that actually does have real problems with blood pressure and stuff. And he constantly says, oh, I can't. And he constantly says, oh, I can't get rid of salt because, it's just the food has no flavor on it. And it's like, well, taper back slowly so you don't really notice it. Or maybe you notice it, but only in manageable ways. Personally, the amount of salt we put in our food now just absolutely baffles me. And there's no good reason for it. To kind of also go back to making a lifestyle change diet is that a diet ends. At the end of it, what do you do? And this is one of the reasons I don't like prepackaged meals. Now, the thing that you did, Jonathan, was a little bit different because that was also a system of convenience, but not to really go into that. But the prepackaged diets I really don't like. At no point are you really learning what you're eating. And then what happens when you go out to eat? Are you going to understand, this versus that? And it's very easy to walk into a restaurant and, in some cases, eat an entire day's worth of calories in one sitting. And so I think making that lifestyle change, not viewing it as a temporary diet and understanding that you change the way you're eating for time, and not just about weight loss, but it really does have an impact on the way you feel and how you interact with the rest of the world.
Yeah, and I think that's the key there is living on those prepackaged meals and not understanding what they are and why you're doing it. So there is a convenience factor. I mean,
absolutely.
After many years of being behind the desk and getting a little out of shape myself, more than a little. And my wife and I both, through our first year of marriage, we love food. She was cooking a lot more. We both put on some weight. So we decided to do a plan that actually did use prepackaged meals. But the way they did it was a habit changing thing. So the whole idea was it was a good plan. You had 5 meals a day. And the whole idea was you were learning to eat less. And you were learning about what portion sizes look like for protein and vegetables and all that. So it was more than just, I'm going to buy this thing and not even know what's in it. It was really all about that whole changing a habit. And that's actually one of the first places that I saw the 21-day concept. So you did this for 21 days. That's it. After that, you were kind of on your own. Now you could supplement with their stuff over time. But really the idea was take what you've learned, now make your own meals. And that was great for us because really we'd gotten into bad habit. The types of food we ate became very carb-based, starch-based, and it was a lot of unhealthy things. And what this allowed us to do is really focus on what we really needed. So for some people that may work as long as you learn something from the process and don't rely on it and become completely self-sufficient.
Exactly. And I think this goes back to kind of one of our larger topics, which is personal responsibility. And that is part of it. You have to take the responsibility to understand what you're doing. You can't just kind of throw up your hands and buy prepackaged food or go to a trainer and not learn and understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. I mean, that's in all of it. Then when time falls away or when life happens, then you don't have, if that's taken away, you fall right back. And it's very easy for that to happen. To I'm going to move into a short section on exercise, and I'm going to give a quick thing about trainers. And this has been my experience with trainers because I've dated a few female trainers, and I've worked out with a couple of different personal trainers. And what I found for me personally, in my experience, was that the older trainers that tend to be kind of in their late 30s, early 40s, they tend to start focusing more on functional training as opposed to training people for looks or just getting somebody ready for a wedding and stuff like that. And I think the idea is that most of these guys and girls that get to that point, it's because they've started to feel the effects of training poorly in their youth. They start to, things where they did something they shouldn't have or did something that overdid something, and those injuries start to really show up and have an effect. And so they, at that point, start to kind of go, maybe I should train more for function and less about looks. And the looks will happen, which the health becomes the main function and the main purpose, and your ability to interact with the world around you in the best way possible. It really becomes the focus. And that's not to say some younger trainers don't get to that mindset earlier. And I think that's very important, because if all you're focused on is looks, it's not going to be about health. You may become more healthy, but it's not going to be the focus, and you're not going to put as much energy into the whole point of the conversation today, which is about being more physically healthy. And so that's kind of been my experience with trainers. And when you're interviewing a new trainer, ask them what their philosophies are. And I'm usually very leery of anybody that gives, I'm going to give you X results in X amount of time.
Right.
I think that's unrealistic, because at that point in the conversation, that trainer has no idea what the client's willpower is, what their body type is, and things like that, unless you're speaking to a very seasoned trainer who can, in a fairly short amount of time, size somebody up and know how serious they're going to be about it, how committed to it they're going to be, and things like that. So, and I think another big one is injuries. And I hear this a lot from people that, push-ups are terrible, or they'll pick some exercise that they think is terrible and that it's just injury prone and you shouldn't do it. And I think a lot of that is crap, because what I've come to understand is push-ups, as an example, are not what's going to blow out a shoulder or anything like that. What's going to blow out a shoulder is doing a push-up incorrectly. And that's one of the things where having a trainer or something like that really does help, because you're going to get somebody that corrects those things so that you do not injure yourself. Hopefully they're a good trainer and don't allow you to injure yourself. And so some of the best ways of avoiding injury is, this all goes back to having patience and doing things slowly. It's don't try to do too much too fast. Your body has to adjust. The muscles have to build, and the ligaments and tendons and everything else, and everything has to loosen. And that's one of the other things I think I see a lot of people neglecting. And my girlfriend's horrible about this, is you really do have to stretch and warm up. The fastest way to really hurt yourself is to not loosen up and be limber and not give the correct amount of time and energy into stretching. And it just shocks me. I mean, some people like Johnny, you have, what is it, your hamstrings or something?
I have extremely tight hamstrings. There's a sheathing around the hamstrings that, and it's not an uncommon thing, but basically, right, the sheathing around the hamstrings is very tight. And over time, when you're working out, it feels almost like shin splints, but on the back of your leg. It's kind of a very strange feeling. But a good personal, this is an area where a good trainer, and it doesn't have to be the most expensive trainer in the world, but like you said earlier, finding a good trainer can really help you understand what it is that's impacting you and slowing your progress, and how to get around it. I mean, there may not be a simple solution of I'll just warm up or I'll just do something. It may be more complicated, where, hey, no matter what you do, this is going to be what happens, and this is how you work around it.
Yeah, exactly. And even with stretching, I mean, that's all stuff that it's take your time with it, slowly understand what you're doing. But that to me is important, because I think that gets missed a lot. I know I've had a lot of friends that are, I want to be a great, big, massive guy. And they'll get in there and they will get big. But that's another kind of side effect. If you're not stretching, you will also become extremely tight and you become very injury prone.
And a good trainer will also help you set realistic expectations for yourself. It's kind of like, and I'm not this is not making fun of anyone in particular, but the whole idea is if after the movie 300 came out, everybody went to their trainer and said, I want to look like the guys from 300.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of, at the gym, you heard a lot of trainers going, all right, let's go make you look like that. Well, that's not real. I mean, the reality is those guys were paid for a year before that movie was ever shot to do nothing but look like that. And most of those guys were professional volleyball players and athletes who didn't look like that when they started the year before.
Uh-huh.
So, and I think you went through a little bit of this where, Thomas kind of sat you down and said, all right, here's what's required to do this. And here's, and not necessarily that particular discussion, but just in terms of goals.
Right.
You were basically sat down and your trainer allowed you to set realistic goals for yourself. And he explained how much work was going to go into each level.
Yeah, exactly. And that was a big part of it.
You could make them realistic because, it's easy to say, yeah, I'm willing to put in the world to look like the guy. I'm going to make it my job for the next year to look like the guys from 300. But the reality is you need somebody to explain just what that really means to understand it.
Mm-hmm. That was massive. That's what time of day do you go to bed? Do you get naps during the day? I mean, that's...
Yeah, are you lifting truck tires? Yeah. I mean, that's...
Yeah.
Those guys were doing high impact, physical, actual weight type exercises that impacted cardio, weights, and everything all at once. And I mean, it was a life that they were living for that year. I saw an interview recently with some of the guys who were in that, and they were asked if they were able to maintain that, and the answer essentially was hell no.
Yeah.
and not only hell no, like I couldn't, but I didn't even want to. Because I knew how much work it required.
And when I saw that, I just remember thinking, my God, how much work that must have been. Because even gotten to the point where when I got to that point, it was like, yeah, I don't want to keep doing this. I don't want to keep doing this like this because I don't want to commit this much of my life purely to what really amounted to was a physical appearance. And I was like,
I don't think we want to focus that much on things you can't do. I think the show's really about the things you can do. And the whole idea is, following some of those initial tips we talked about, focusing on diet and making sure you get a reasonable amount of exercise. It is actually quite impressive how quickly you can get healthy again.
Mm-hmm.
And most of us, and myself included, you as well, I know we both go through periods where we don't do the things we want to do when it comes to ourselves, and we get caught up in all the other stuff going on. But I mean, when I started my 2012 Chi plan, I had a bunch of goals around my health and fitness in there, and I have actually, as of about 2 weeks ago, achieved those physical fitness goals. My cardiovascular system is back where I want it to be. My weight is exactly where I want it to be. I'm literally hovering between 0.5 pound when I weigh myself now. And so I am quite happy with that. But it was also the other thing to keep in mind as we talk about how easy it is, and it is easy to get yourself back in shape. It's just a mindset change. It's also just as easy, if not easier, to allow yourself to get out of shape. But believe it or not, and maybe this is something we could talk about a little bit too, it actually does require work to get yourself significantly out of shape. And if you take that effort and time that you put into getting yourself out of shape, the amount of times you just kind of did nothing instead of doing something, the amount of times you ate that thing you shouldn't have eaten and you knew you shouldn't have, you even had the argument with yourself. We've all done that. I did it last night. You have that argument with yourself about, I don't need this. And I don't even really, I want it, but I don't even want it that badly. It just happens to be right here at the table. And you eat it anyway. Believe it or not, the amount of emotional work that went into that, you could have just as easily said no and you'd feel better about yourself. And I know I would have. I mean, I don't feel great about myself this morning having eaten what I ate last night. It was delicious. But at the end of the day, now I achieved my goals. So for me, maybe I look at some of those things as a little bit of that reward. I am working out. I'm very careful about not saying I'm going to have it tonight and fix it tomorrow. But again, it's sometimes it actually is, when you really sit down and think about it, more work to let yourself get out of shape than it is to let yourself get into shape. And it feels a lot worse. Getting into shape, the feeling is so great the first time you walk up a flight of stairs and aren't catching your breath at the top.
And with that, we wrap up episode 66. Thank you for joining us today. This has been an episode from the In the Rabbit Hole Urban Survival Podcast. You can learn more by visiting intherabbithole.com. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more great survival stuff.